Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Autism Hope education page. Very, very excited to have our next guest, Joe Carr. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Well, today we're going to be talking about a subject that I think is just so important. It's how to empower your autistic child. And I think that so many of us get so focused on therapies and diets and doctor's appointments. Sometimes we forget, the self-esteem part of that and really how to empower their strengths. So I love that we're going to be talking about that today. Before we get started, though, can you give us a little bit of background about, why you're so passionate about helping the autistic community?
Sure. So, I was raised in Kansas City, Missouri, when I was not diagnosed with autism. Did not fit the stereotype of your traditional Asperger's kid. I was very outgoing. I was very loud. I was very creative, rambunctious. And so they didn't really know what was wrong with me. They called me ADHD, which was true, I guess, but not enough. It wasn't totally accurate. And so I had a very difficult childhood socially, but was very gifted in the performing arts. And my mom discovered that the performing arts were where I shined, where that big energy was really great up on a stage, was not so great in a classroom or taking over a social group, so I was in trouble at school a lot and had a really hard time making friends, but was really great on stage and became a professional child actor. And it left me, really passionate about children and helping them find their passion and their voice. And as I found my own, I was diagnosed with autism in college as part of a personal growth journey where I was trying to improve myself and become more powerful. And, just realized that ultimately the biggest thing I needed to overcome was that shameful idea that I'm broken, that something is wrong with me and that I'm always going to be excluded or I'm always going to be attacked or made wrong. And that once I got over that belief system, was like, no, I'm talented, I'm powerful, and decided to believe that strongly. Like my life became, much to reflect that. And now I have an amazing wife. We have a gorgeous daughter. We have an amazing community of friends. We started a baby food company together that is helping make babies healthier through ultra nutritious baby foods. That's doing really successful. I have a whole team of people working under me, and I'm able to use all the passion I have to make children's lives better through making them healthier with food, and also my ability to perform and speak and take up a lot of space. I use that to raise money for the company or to pitch a retailer or to gain awareness for our products and also in the autism community.
Now, you talked about your mom finding your passion for, performing. Were there other things that she tried that weren't as effective?
She tried everything. She tried, sports were the obvious thing because I was so rambunctious, right? And that's what boys do. Boys play sports. But it was just, there's so much waiting in sports, there's so much like standing around. They're so social. I didn't get to be I would get to be the center of attention. So I just was not really good. I also was not that coordinated. I was an amazing dancer, it turned out, but was not so great with sports. We tried 4-H. Again, I liked it okay, but the social issues were really tough. We tried Boy Scouts, was totally bullied in Boy Scouts. That was probably one of the places I was bullied the most, unfortunately. So just couldn't handle that. And one other parent actually saw me dancing around or being silly and pointed out that maybe she should try a dance class. And so she found a local kids dance troupe. And I was given a solo in the performance at the very first performance. Like my first time in there, they were like, oh, wow, this kid's got to be at the front. And so I started doing that and then started auditioning and eventually even got an agent, was doing like commercials and television. And I was the character spot. So whenever there was the kid that was the wild, zany, intense kid, that was me, and really loved it.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love that your mom didn't give up. She just kept trying different things like, oh, this didn't work. All right, let's try this. And just kind of tried to throw you in to see what stuck,
Yep.
And so I love that. Now, we're talking about empowering your autistic child. I know a lot of kids might not even know that they have autism or, exactly what autism is. How do you suggest parents, approach that subject with their child?
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate of talking about autism early and often. because to avoid talking about it makes it sound like there's something wrong with it. This is a hidden, shameful thing that we're not going to mention, right? And then they learn about it anyway, one way or another, and they already know they're different. You're not going to pretend that they're not different, and they know it. So for me, not knowing why I was different, it had me internalize this idea that I was just broken, that I was just wrong and bad. And so when I learned in college that I was autistic, and I learned oh, this is why these challenges are so much greater for me. It's not that I'm wrong or bad. It's just I'm different. And this is a way that I'm different. And there are other people different like me that I can now seek out and learn from, and learn about how to manage some of these challenges, but also understand that, man, all my gifts, my big energy, my passion, my willingness to stand out in front of a crowd, to go against the grain, my fast, sharp mind, all of those were gifts of autism that were the flip side of the social challenges and the physical challenges and all the other things. And I wouldn't trade all those gifts for anything. So when I realized I was autistic, I was like, okay, I can accept that these other challenges are harder for me because I love these benefits and they're a huge part of who I am. And so I think we really need to introduce not only what autism is and to an autistic kid that they are autistic, that this is something that makes them different and special, that there are other people like you, so you're not alone. And there's a whole community of people that are working to create a more inclusive world for you that you're going to get to be a part of. And that there's amazing gifts that you have that I see in you. And they're because of autism also, so we can be grateful that autism gave you these gifts, and we can emphasize those. We can also recognize that there's some things that are real easy for everyone else that are not easy for you, and that's not your fault. That's because you're autistic, right? It's, we can work on mitigating those, and just really reducing that idea that autism is shameful, because or that it's a disease or something broken about us. The rest of the world is going to give us that message anyway. They're going to hear that somewhere, but just don't let them hear it at home. Let the home environment be we celebrate autism, you're an autistic kid and we love you for who you are. I kind of compare it to maybe kids who come out as gay or bisexual or transgendered. They're different. There's nothing wrong with them. They were born that way, and the life is going to be a little harder. There's some challenges they're going to face, but it's a part of who they are. And to deny it or hide it in any way only contributes more to the shame that has to be undone, and allowing them to be powerful for it. It's I'm autistic and I know it, and these are the challenges I have and how I'm going to mitigate them, and these are the benefits and how we're going to emphasize them, and be prepared to self-advocate.
And I think those watching, because, we definitely do a lot of videos on biomedical. We're not talking about the kids, not trying to help those kids get better when they're having gut issues and epilepsy, and they're not looking and they're not talking and they're not social like you, Joe, right? Those kids, someone like my son, for example, he needs 24-hour care at the moment, right? So I embrace him. I celebrate him more than I think anybody could celebrate anybody. I am the most goofy, most silly mom, if you saw me behind the scenes, and I'm always celebrating and in celebrating for who he is. But I also know that he is sick with a lot of other stuff because he has a lot of autoimmune issues that are also going on. So I want to just be clear, when we're talking about what Joe's talking about, these are kids that don't have some of those other symptoms that we talk about with some of our other kids on the spectrum. And with the spectrum, it's very wide, right? So it could go from California to New York, and everybody falls somewhere different. So, I don't want people to write us and say, well, what about Kristen? You've talked about kids trying to get better. And if all of our kids look like Joe, I would be celebrating that every day, every second of every minute. I would just love it so much. So that I just love to celebrate. But for the kids that are sick, and I'm talking about, they have mitochondrial disease characteristics. They're having chronic ear infections all the time. They're, not potty trained and they're 19 years old. These are the kids that we hope to get them to where you are, Joe. So I just want to make sure people understand we're celebrating the label, whatever we're calling this, because I don't know what politically correct is anymore because we're constantly changing it up. The label of getting that diagnosis of autism, but within that label, a lot of times we have lots of other stuff going on. And so if we didn't have all that other stuff going on and we just had autism, then I think that makes a lot of sense. So I just want to
I don't want to imply that it doesn't mean we do a lot of work to mitigate the challenges. Like, it's not like we just say, oh, well, they're bad at social skills, so they're autistic, so they're going to play video games in the basement all day. That's just how they are. We're going to celebrate autism and let them do that. Like, I don't agree with that. Like, you know, there's a way to push and challenge any child, you know, who is struggling with something, because all kids struggle with something, you know, and finding that right balance and understanding that autism does play a role in making certain things a lot harder, and recognizing that, be like, hey, I hear that, you know, that autism makes this harder for you, and it doesn't mean you're still going to have to learn how to do it, you know, like we're going to find a way. And I think that's part of empowerment, is like, and I think anybody in the disability community talks about empowerment, doesn't mean that we don't seek treatment for symptoms that make our lives harder. You know, it just means that we don't believe that we're inherently flawed or broken, because that can actually cause us to seek even less treatment for those symptoms, right? Like, so for me, empowerment is really about, you know, feeding interests and finding the things they're good at whatever severity level of autism, whatever they enjoy, whatever their thing they like to do is, to feed that and celebrate it. And then whatever challenges can be mitigated, especially when you talk about the comorbid issues, you know, there's tons of treatments and things to do. But I think kids are really smart anyway, including a lot of the nonverbal, you know, autistic kids that I know. Like, you know, they can understand a lot, and talking about what epilepsy is, talking about, you know, what, you know, gut, you know, issues are, like just explaining to them what's happening so that they have some power as much as they can. And sometimes they don't have a choice in what the treatment's going to be. We as a parent have to make choices sometimes, to be like, this is uncomfortable and this is what's best for you. But at least including them in on the process of like, this is why I made that decision. And if there's some flexibility to have them have a say in it, you know, do that as much as possible. If they can do this not later instead of now, or they can use this as opposed to this, you know, as many choices as they can, the better. So they have that sense of empowerment. While recognizing that there are times where we have to make those choices, and at least the least you can do is communicate and explain and give them that.
Well, and I love that explanation, because I know with even my son, he has a limited language, but we believe he understands everything, and it's really cool when he can express something that we didn't know he could. Like, we always believe he understands it, but when he expresses that he understands it, we're like, whoa, that's so awesome, you know? And so I love that. And when we have our son in the room, and we're getting better at this, and I think this is something for everybody to kind of keep in their mind, we do our best not to talk about him while he's like there. And so let's say I'm having a conversation with a therapist, or, you know, the doctor, you know, I'll say, hey, Jackson, we're going to be talking about blah, 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 blah. This is what the doctor's trying to talk about when we're talking about this, because I know he's understanding stuff. And I would think it'd be frustrating if it were me and I couldn't express it, and somebody was like talking about me, you know, when I'm there and they're not addressing that I'm there, like I'm not invisible, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think when you're talking about empowering, it's like reminding ourselves that, hey, our kids may not always be able to express stuff, but that does not mean they're invisible. That means that they just can't tell you, you know, in a way that you and I might be able to say.
Yep.
So I think empowerment is really important. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. So how can having an empowered autistic child make life easier for a parent?
Yeah. So, you know, obviously empowerment, you think of, oh, it's great for them. They feel better. They feel more powerful. They might have success later in life, right? There's lots of arguments there. But even in the short run, you know, if kids are dependent, if they inherit, you know, take in this idea that they depend on you for anything, you know, whether it's to get them up in the morning for school, or whether it's food or anything, any place where they believe they're dependent, it makes more work for you, because they're going to expect you to do it all the time. So the more independent they can be, which probably takes more effort in the beginning to teach them how to do it themselves. It may be really easy just to do it for them, you know, but like, you know, like I have a 15-month-old, and she, you know, likes to go up and down the stairs, but oftentimes she's like, no, I don't want to go up and down the stairs, you know, so it takes longer for me to like insist that she crawl up and like spot her while she does it. But like, the more I teach her that, just as a metaphor, the less I have to carry her up and down the stairs. right? Even though in the beginning it takes longer it may, you know, and for some autistic kids, it could be painstaking how long it takes, whether it's, you know, feeding themselves or making them food or getting themselves up or whatever, you know, but like once they internalize this idea that I own my body and I own my life and I'm in charge of this, you know, the less work you have to do. And there's an amazing blogger, the Wellness Mama. She has 6 kids. Wow. and runs a company, and one of her ethos is she doesn't do anything for their kid that they can do for themselves. So her 5-year-old is like doing their own laundry, you know, and like her babies are feeding themselves on the floor, just eating, right? Like she doesn't feed them, she doesn't do their laundry. And yes, it takes a lot longer in the beginning because it's so much easier to be like, just eat the food, here, eat it, I'll put it in your mouth, you know, okay, I'll just do your laundry. But like in the end, they become super powerful. So I think it can really make their life easier.
I love that. And I totally agree. We're in the process right now of, you know, trying to teach him to do his own laundry and, you know, even like the simple things like, you know, he brushes his teeth, but we do kind of go over it because but it's practice. I mean, it's like it's so much easier to do it for them in the beginning, as you're so right. But at the long run, and the end of the day, you're like, but it'd be so much easier if they knew how to do it themselves, you know? And like, even just drying off, like I have to be okay that he's a little bit wet when he puts a shirt on because he's not getting it perfect, but the more he practices, eventually he's going to understand that he may not want to be wet on his back, you know? And it doesn't and I think for moms and dads out there, we have to, and this is something for me, at least, I'm always reminding myself, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like it doesn't have to be the way you would do it. It's totally okay if their bed, the pillows aren't exactly perfect, but if they made it and they threw the pillows up there, it's totally okay because the more they do it, the better they're going to get at it. And it may not always be the way you do it, it's the way they do it. And that's one thing, as my son's getting older, I'm like, okay, it's the way you're doing it. That's your life and that's okay. And, you know, if he was neurotypical, he probably still wouldn't make the bed the way I wanted him to. So I love this. I think it's so important, you know, to empower your children. One of the things that I say to my son Joe, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. We do affirmations like every morning and night, and it's just simple things reminding him that he can do things by himself. So I always tell him, Jackson, you're smart, you're brave, you're funny, and you're fun. You're thoughtful, you're kind, and you can do anything. And I'm constantly trying to put that. And sometimes there'll be another new word. Like the other day, he said. What did he say? He said, thoughtful is one of the newer words, I think, because the other day he goes, thoughtful. I'm like, you are thoughtful, like, you know, and so letting him know, like, you know, that he takes ownership of those words. And I love that. Do you think that's a good idea for our,
I think that's great. You know, words are super important, you know, around that. And it's good for you as much as it is for him, so that you are continually reminding yourself to approach him as this thoughtful, beautiful, powerful being. You know, the intention is every bit as important as the words, because we intuit. All children are very intuitive around their parents' intention. I think autistic people were even more intuitive, like we really feel the underneath it all, you know? So in addition to words is like the genuine belief and they, you know, they lead to each other, but I think would be important to, no matter what you say, to be approaching with that idea. And yeah, I think that's a great practice.
And something easy we can do. You know, it's really cool to see the personality come out. And those that are watching, this is even for limited language. And my son has limited language. And when he first said, because we used to say funny, because he'd always be goofy and silly. And then one day he goes, and fun. And I was like, wow, he knows the difference between funny and fun, right? Like, because he wanted to make sure to tell me that. So I think it's a great thing for parents to do. And, you know, I always enjoy doing it with him every morning and night. And I think it's important for him to wake up feeling that way and go to bed feeling that way. And so I just love talking about empowerment. I could talk about it all day long. I think it's something that as parents, we get super busy running from point A to point B, that sometimes there's that saying, you got to stop and smell the flowers, right? Or the roses. And I think that with our kids, we got to stop and really think about, you know, what is this all about at the end of the day? And it's about giving them the best feeling that they can be, to be the best that they can be. So I love that. How do people find more about you, Joe?
Yeah, you can read more about me and my story at aspiepower.com, ASPIE power.com. And you can learn more about my company at myserenitykids.com, our awesome nutrient-dense baby food purees. I just want to leave with the final tip about self-advocacy, which is like really teaching and allowing your kid to advocate for themselves as much as possible. My parents used to make us, if we wanted more ketchup for our French fries, we'd have to go up and ask ourselves. And that was easy for me. I was like, give me all the ketchup. My sister was like really shy. It was really hard for her to do. But they insisted, well, you don't get more ketchup if you don't ask, And so I think with autistic kids, we have IUP meetings and we have all these care providers and all this other stuff. And it's very easy to speak for them because it's faster. But the more we can allow them to say what they want and why they're there and what their desires are, and telling people they have autism and learning to say I'm autistic and this is what I need. It took me a long time to learn to do that. And now I tell everybody because it makes my whole life better to let everybody know how to be with me, how to love me, how to, what services I need. And like teaching that early and often to let the kids like vocalize it and say it when possible. Really raise your empowered autistic child.
I love it. It's all about empowerment, self-esteem, and just believing that, they can do it. And I love that. So thank you so much for being here today, Joe.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching. Until next time. Bye, guys.